Today, we crusade. Jake from Monsters and Munchkins here, and today we are going to be talking about why me, as a DM and an avid role player, loves the Warhammer 40,000 Crusade system. Now, in addition to my love for role-playing, I'm also an avid wargamer. I've been playing Warhammer 40,000 seriously since the start of 8th edition. Last year, I went to a number of tournaments, doing fairly well, although never getting enough ITC points to be ranked highly, but I did have quite a few favorable showings with my favorite factions, Chaos, and eventually my favorite codex, Chaos Knights. When I saw 9th edition was coming out, on top of all the other exciting things I was excited to try, whenever we get a new edition, it's always fun, I was really looking forward to the Crusade system. Now, Crusade is the new narrative system for Warhammer 40,000. I know when it was initially launched, some people's, like Winter's SEO, who I absolutely love, was saying that they were not big fans of the way the system works, saying it was too clunky, too filled with rules. It sucked the fun out of the game, and it wasn't what narrative players wanted. And that could be true. As someone who never really focused too much on the narrative of 40K when playing the games, is something I got into more recently. But as someone who wasn't initially just focused on the narrative and more focused on just playing the game, I actually really liked the idea of Crusade. Yes, Crusade won't be for those people who just want to play open play. I mean, there is still open play for that, and you can still make campaigns however you want. Just because Crusade lays down a rule set doesn't mean that we need to follow it to the letter. I mean, on this channel for the Dungeons & Dragons content, I'm a huge advocate for using homebrews and alternative rule sets and embellishing upon your game and doing what you need to do to make your narrative be told in a fun and meaningful way. But ultimately, as someone who is both interested in Warhammer 40K, the miniatures game, and role-playing in various different games, Pathfinder, Dungeons & Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, I do like Crusade. It helps me tell my story for my army. And maybe that's just because I'm used to role-playing through a rule set, but I do enjoy rules at the end of the day, and I'm glad that we have something like Crusade. The experience point system to me felt very familiar, playing Dungeons & Dragons, leveling up your character as you go. It feels like home looking through the Crusade system. I also really like the addition of battle scars and stuff for the armies and glory. I don't remember exactly what it's called. When you do something good, when you don't mess up, and when your army wins, getting requisition points to better your force. So ultimately, I think Crusade is going to be for a niche group of Warhammer players, but a group of players that is going to be very excited to try out the system. It's going to be for the people who do enjoy role-playing, and it's going to be for the people who wanted a rule set for their army to tell their stories through, and it's not going to be for the people that just want to play competitively. Now, I do love competitive play. I do love playing war games of all types competitively, but Crusade in particular can be power gamed, and I suggest that you don't do it. Crusade should be for telling a fun story. It should not be for exploiting the power level system, which still isn't great, but to be fair, they're working on it. And it shouldn't be for just crushing your friends and turning your army into this unstoppable death ball. Don't be that guy who shows up to the first game with an overpowered unit at a low points level and just spams it and you crush all of your friends. Don't be the guy that brings 2 Keepers of Secrets to a Crusade. Not saying keepers are overpowered, I'm just saying it'd be very difficult to deal with 2 of them at 50 power. So ultimately, yes, as a role player, as a dungeon master, as a game master, I am excited for Crusade. Now that we've talked about that in particular, let's dive into the actual rule set for Crusade. For those of us that have played this past edition of Warhammer 40K, building an army in Crusade should be somewhat familiar. You pick an overarching faction, that could be Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, Tyranids, Tau, or Orcs. You can also add unaligned units to your faction, such as fortifications or the gribbly thing from Blackstone Fortress, which I can't remember the name of. It'll be on the screen. Your order of battle for Crusade is assembled with as many units as you want. You make a Crusade card for each unit. There was a very helpful Redditor which made like a Crusade primer and Crusade battle cards. Those will be in the description of the video down below, along with his username as thanks. So you're starting with 50 power level, and the first games you play will be assembled with a 25 power level force. Now, you can expand your Crusade's supply limit, that's what the 50 power level is, with requisition points later on. Upgrades work a little bit differently in Crusade. You're not using pre-game stratagems to give your Lord of Contagion reroll 1s. You are using requisition points to buy relics and upgrades and warlord traits for your characters. Just because you have a warlord doesn't mean that it starts with a warlord trait. You need to buy them one with your requisition points. Now, roster building in Crusade works kind of like building list now in 9th edition for tournaments. Once you add a unit to your army, you don't get to change its relics, its warlord traits, any of that stuff. You can't change its alignment, its faction alignment. You can't change psychic powers, war gears. Everything stays the same once you add it to your army. Now, certain things can be upgraded with requisition points in the future, but the base things that you leave on its data sheet in your army on that Crusade card cannot be changed. Once you have assembled your starting force, you start putting together the narrative and the crunch mechanics of it. You begin by filling out your Crusade cards. You make a backstory for them. You give them some agendas. You give them some goals throughout the campaign. You give them some grudges. Hopefully, if you're playing in a campaign, it'll be who you're fighting against, or an enemy that you're trying to gain an advantage on, like will be in our Crusade. And then you get to spend your first 5 requisition points, which you get for free. You can use those to buy warlord traits, relics, etc., etc. So going into the game, let's talk about experience points a little bit. Now, for those of you that are RPers, for those of you that have played Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, those types of games, experience points are fairly familiar to us, and they're different than victory points in 40k. You get experience points for your army by having them do things. Off the bat, everybody gets 1 experience point for fighting in the battle. Then you get additional experience points. You get experience points for every 3 units destroyed. You can do marked for greatness on a character. They will get experience points for completing certain goals, and your whole army gets experience points for achieving their agendas. However, on the flip side of this, and something that I think is really cool, in addition to the experience points that your army accrues over the course of a game, they also can get battle scars. So if you get hurt in the game, if a unit is taken out of action, you roll on a table and it has a meaningful impact over the course of the game. This is something that I think is cool. It has been implemented in some games like the Dungeons & Dragons Madness system, which I'm kind of like neither here nor there on. I've implemented certain things in my games and just had conversations with players over what might happen to their characters after a traumatic experience. And I appreciate the fact that in a narrative system, GW has put this into their game to help us tell a meaningful narrative. It would make sense that a unit of guardsmen that has been going through this grueling war and suffering casualties would be losing some of their morale and getting worn down a bit. I really like it. Now, in addition to the battle scars and to the experience points, you can buy requisition points throughout the course of the Crusade, and you get 1 requisition point for just playing, even if you do really bad. You can only have 5 requisition points at any point in time, so no really point in hoarding them. But you can keep in mind if you want to use them to expand your force, maybe you spend a few and then you save it through a few and then you spend them. And you get to a point where you've grown your army up a bit, and it's just a really cool system to upgrade a force throughout the course of a campaign. Now, in addition to the normal relics and upgrades that you can also get Crusade-specific upgrades, battle-specific upgrades, and things that are relevant to your story to upgrade your army, which I really like. And they promise that they will be expanding upon this, and I can't wait to see what else they come out for in the individual codexes. After all this happens and you set up your army, it's time to go play some games. You figure out what points you're playing, figure out what table size you're playing, figure out what missions you're playing from the Crusade missions, and then you roll off, set up your armies, apply the relevant things, and you're ready to go. I do like the Crusade system because it's easy to keep track of this stuff, and even if you just want to keep telling this army story outside of the campaign, you can take your Crusade army and play up against anybody and get Crusade experience points for your army. Now, why do I really like this as a DM and as a role player? I appreciate that we have a system for just telling stories with our models. Wrath and Glory is great. I love the role-playing system in that. I love the new role-playing system that they redid for that. But having something just specifically for our models to tell a story with, I think that's really cool. Now, there are some models in my army that I really like my first Lord of Contagion, like my first Demon Prince, and having those models now come out and tell stories is really, really cool. Having a system like Crusade to tell stories where I can get together with my friends, we have a rule set for this. We're just not pulling stuff out of our ass and making things up as we go, but actually having this be laying down and having a way to tell our story through a system, I appreciate that as someone who is an avid player of role-playing games. I also think Crusade is especially good for people that are growing their army. Let's say you've been playing Kill Team for a long time and you want to jump into the big game. Well, this is a good way to start. You take your small force, you add some things to it, you probably will have around 25 power to start playing, and you can grow your army up from there. In the description down below of this video, there will be my Crusade force for the upcoming Crusade, which will not be coming out this Sunday, but the Sunday after that. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you feel that there's anything I've missed for Crusade, please let me know down below, and I hope you all come back next week to watch our first Crusade game. If you'd like to help the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little bell button so you know what's going on. And to stay more in touch with us, you can follow all applicable links in the description down below. In the meantime, I've been Jake from Monsters and Munchkins, and you, my audience, have been wonderful. Till I see you again, don't forget to have fun and roll some dice.